Elias hated the silence of Holloway's more than anything else. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was heavy, filled with the stale smell of old perfume and the settling dust of a century-old building. The floorboards creaked under his boots, a sound that echoed through the vast, empty atrium like a gunshot. It was 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. The store had been closed for 5 hours, but inside, the air felt watchful. His routine was rigid, a mental checklist he clung to in order to keep his sanity. Basement, check the boiler. First floor, cosmetics and jewelry. Second floor, menswear. And then the dreaded third floor, the bridal and formal wear section. Elias always stalled before hitting the escalator to the third floor. There was something wrong with the air up there. It was colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer than physics should allow. But tonight, he couldn't stall forever. He clicked his flashlight on, the beam cutting through the darkness, and began his ascent. The escalator groaned as he walked up the stationary metal steps. As his head cleared the floor level, his beam swept across the sea of white lace and tulle. The bridal section was designed to look like a dream, but in the dark, it looked like a graveyard of ghosts. And that's when he saw it. In the center display, on a raised velvet dais, there were supposed to be 3 mannequins. He knew this because he had named them out of boredom months ago: the blushing bride, the maid of honor, and the flower girl. They had been there since he started the job, but tonight there were 4. Elias stopped dead in his tracks, his heart skipping a violent beat against his ribs. He swept the flashlight beam back and forth. 1, 2, 3, 4. The new addition was standing slightly behind the others, almost shyly. But there was nothing shy about its appearance. While the other mannequins wore pristine, sparkling white gowns from the current season, the 4th figure was draped in a dress that looked ancient. The lace was yellowed with age, the hem tattered and stained with something dark that looked ominously like dry mud. "Central," Elias muttered into his radio, his voice trembling slightly. "Did maintenance move a new display up to the 3rd floor? Over?" Static. Just a hiss of white noise. Elias frowned. He took a step closer, his boots crunching on something brittle on the carpet. He looked down. Dead flies. Hundreds of them, scattered in a circle around the dais. He looked back up at the 4th mannequin. It didn't look right. The others had smooth, featureless faces or stylized, abstract features. This one was hyper-realistic. It had pores. It had faint wrinkles around the mouth. The eyes weren't painted on. They were glass, catching the reflection of his flashlight with a wet, predatory glint. And it was staring. Not forward, towards the imaginary aisle, but angled slightly to the left, directly at the security camera mounted on the pillar. A chill crawled up Elias's spine. He backed away slowly, refusing to turn his back on it. He needed to get to the security booth on the 1st floor. He needed to see the footage. He needed to make sure he was just tired. He practically ran down the escalators, the echoes of his footsteps sounding like someone was chasing him. He burst into the small security office and slammed the door, locking it. His hands shook as he rewound the digital tape for camera 3B. He watched the grainy black and white footage. He saw himself walk up the escalator. He saw himself stop. He saw himself staring at the display. But on the screen, there were only 3 mannequins. Elias blinked, rubbing his eyes. He paused the video. The blushing bride, the maid of honor, and the flower girl. There was no 4th figure in the tattered dress. On the screen, Elias was staring at empty space, terrified of nothing. "I'm losing it," he whispered, gripping the edge of the desk. "I'm losing my mind." He grabbed his thermos and poured coffee, his hands shaking so badly he spilled it. He sat there for 20 minutes, convincing himself it was a hallucination, a trick of the light, sleep deprivation. He just needed to go back up there, prove to himself it was empty, and finish his shift. He forced himself to stand up. He unlocked the office door. The moment he opened it, he froze. The department store was silent, but the air had changed. The smell of stale perfume was gone, replaced by the copper tang of blood and the damp, earthy scent of wet soil. And there, standing in the middle of the cosmetics aisle, on the first floor, 2 floors down from where it should have been, was the fourth mannequin. It was facing away from him, its tattered yellow dress dragging on the polished tile. Its head was cocked at an unnatural angle, as if its neck was broken. Elias didn't scream. He couldn't. His throat had seized up. He fumbled for his baton, his brain screaming at him to run, but his legs felt heavy, like he was moving through water. Scrach. The sound was deafening in the silence. The mannequin took a step. Its plastic joints didn't click. They cracked, like snapping bone. It didn't turn around. It just stood there, twitching. Then a sound came from it. A low, dry wheezing, like air being forced through a crushed windpipe. Elias? It knew his name. Elias perned and ran. He bolted towards the main entrance, his keys jingling violently at his hip. He reached the glass double doors and shoved the key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. He rattled the doors, panic rising in his chest like bile. Through the glass, he could see the streetlights, the safety of the outside world, just inches away. But the lock was jammed. He backed away from the doors, pulling his radio out again. "Mayday! Is anyone receiving this? I am locked in. There is someone in here." Static. And then a voice cut through the noise. It wasn't the dispatcher. It was a distorted, plastic-sounding mimicry of his own voice. Did maintenance move a new display up to the 3rd floor? Over? The transmission ended with a giggle, a wet, gurgling giggle. Elias realized then that the store wasn't letting him leave. He ran for the employee exit in the back, sprinting past the jewelry counters. As he passed the mirrors, he saw movement. Not just the fourth mannequin, the others. The male mannequins in the suits were turning their heads as he passed. The children in the kids section were slowly raising their arms, pointing at him. They were all part of it. The Hive. He reached the freight elevator. He smashed the button. The old gears groaned and the cage descended. He threw himself inside and slammed the gate shut just as the shadows in the hallway began to detach themselves from the walls. "Basement! The tunnel in the basement!" The elevator shuddered and began to go down. Elias slumped against the metal wall, tears streaming down his face. He checked his gun. He didn't have one, just a useless baton and pepper spray. The elevator clanked to a halt. The basement. He opened the gate and stepped out into the damp concrete corridor. It was darker here. The air was freezing. He clicked his flashlight on. The beam was dying, flickering yellow. "Come on," he whispered, slapping the side of the light. The beam stabilized, illuminating the long corridor filled with old inventory crates. And there, standing at the very end of the hallway, blocking the exit, was the fourth mannequin. But it had changed. It was no longer facing away. It was facing him. And now Elias could see why the dress was stained. The chest of the mannequin was split open, the fiberglass ribs cracked outward like a rib cage. Inside the hollow cavity, there were no mechanics, no stuffing. There was a face, a human face, mashed and contorted, trapped inside the plastic torso, screaming silently. The mannequin raised its arms. Its fingers were long, sharpened into points. It began to run. It didn't run like a human. It galloped, its limbs flailing wildly, its head bobbing loose on its neck. The sound of its hard feet striking the concrete was like a hammer striking an anvil. Clack, 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 clack. Elias turned to run back to the elevator, but the gate had slammed shut. He was trapped. The thing was closing the distance. 30 feet, 20 feet. Elias swung his baton wildly, screaming in primal terror. "Get back! Get back!" The mannequin lunged. It didn't strike him. It embraced him. Its hard, cold arms wrapped around him with the force of a hydraulic press. Elias felt his ribs crack. He felt the air leave his lungs. He looked into the face of the mannequin, the realistic, pore-filled skin. The eyes of the mannequin rolled back, and the jaw unhinged, opening wider than a human mouth ever could. A sweet, chemical smell washed over him, the smell of fresh fiberglass resin. You fit, the mannequin whispered, its voice vibrating against Elias's chest. Elias felt a burning sensation on his legs. He looked down. His pants were dissolving, merging with his skin. His skin was turning hard, smooth and white. The paralysis shot up his body. His knees locked together, fusing into a solid block of plastic. "No!" he screamed, but his lips felt stiff. He tried to blink, but his eyelids were hardening. The transformation rushed up his neck.
The last thing Elias felt was the warmth of the fourth mannequin's embrace turning into a cold, eternal solidarity. The last thing he saw was the flashlight rolling away on the floor, its light flickering out. The next morning, the store manager, Mrs. Higgins, walked into the bridal section on the third floor. She was agitated. The night guard, Elias, was nowhere to be found. He had abandoned his post. She sighed, taking out her clipboard to check the inventory. She looked at the center dais. "Strange," she murmured, tapping her pen against her chin. The display was beautiful. The lighting was perfect. But she was sure there used to be 3 groomsmen mannequins in the back row. Now there was a fourth. He was handsome in a way. He wore a sharp tuxedo, but the manufacturer had made an odd choice with the expression. His mouth was frozen open, as if mid-shout. And his eyes? Mrs. Higgins leaned in closer. The eyes were incredibly realistic. They looked wet. And if she didn't know better, she would have sworn they were looking right at her, begging. She shrugged, turned off the lights, and walked away. Behind her, in the dark, a single tear rolled down the plastic cheek of the new mannequin. It couldn't move. It couldn't scream. It could only wait for the lights to go out again.